Hi everyone, this is Melissa with Two Peas in a Bucket, and I'm here with this week's Project Life video. And this was a really fun one to put together because I asked on the forum if anybody had any topics they'd like to see covered in Project Life, and someone suggested stamping. And there were several other suggestions that I'll get to in later videos, but this time around I'm going to look at some different ways to incorporate stamps in your Project Life layout. So I'm very quickly going to just go through the beginning process of this layout. I'm using the Happy-Go-Lucky collection to start with from Echo Park. It's one of their Photo Freedom lines. And just selecting some patterns that can go behind photos that aren't quite 4x6, just to add some color behind them. I'm not really thinking a whole lot about what I'm putting where right now. Things may get a little bit off balance in this first pass, but there was another thread on the forum recently about how to get started on a layout. And I found that one of the easiest ways to get a layout started is just to put something on the page and get a first draft, and then go back and move things around until you're happy with the layout. So I'm doing that right now with the pattern papers and now the journaling cards. Happy-Go-Lucky doesn't have a lot of journaling cards with room for writing, so I pulled out some of the Glitz Uncharted Waters. And I really like both the chalkboard and that tan journaling card in that spot. So I'm going to leave them both up there and decide which one to use later on in the layout. I have 3 different ways I use stamps on layouts to show you. And I'm going to start by stamping some journaling cards. These sets that I'm using are from Studio Calico. They're older sets that were exclusive to Two Peas. I don't have a lot of Project Life stamps, but if you're looking for a set to start with, I recommend one that has smaller images, maybe one larger frame. And I'm going to heat emboss this, and I've stamped it up with Versamark, and I'm making sure that I get a really good impression, because sometimes on stamps that have large image areas, if you don't press really well, you can get a gap. And I'm going to sprinkle some embossing powder, and I've got it on a sheet of paper folded in the middle just to help funnel it back into the jar later. And right now I'm just going to tap off the excess and then heat it up with a heat gun to melt the powder in place. You can also just stamp a card. I'm stamping these on Becky Higgins 3x4 journaling cards. These are from the Project Life kits that should be appearing in the Two Piece store soon. Just ink up the stamp and press it right onto a card. You can of course do this with a 3x4 piece of paper as well. So now I'm going to decide which of these cards I want to use, and there's already a lot of aqua going on the page. I stamped these before I actually started on the layout, and so I'm going to go with the blue one instead. I do most of my stamping before I start on a page. In fact, sometimes I'll do it when I'm not even scrapbooking. If you're feeling like you want to do something kind of creative, but don't really feel like making a layout, then grabbing some stamps and paper and stamping up some journaling cards or some embellishments is a great way to get some creative time in without actually having to commit to making a page. So I'm just going to choose the last few journaling cards. I've moved on to Glitz Love You Madly to try to bring in a little bit more pink. And there's a lot of pink on the left side and not so much on the right, so I'm going to swap the blue and the pink to try to balance things out. And then also choose some journaling cards for the insert. And this is where I'm going to pull that chalkboard insert in. Usually when I make an insert, I make them really, really simple. This was my birthday week, so I had a lot of photos to include from just a couple of days. And one bonus with this card is that I can actually include a little collage of photos on the back of it as well and not have to insert another card on the back. And I've also chosen this Life is Good filler card just to add a little bit of color and text. And that's where that collage is going to go. So we'll set that off to the side and take a look at making a second pass. Now right away I noticed that I missed a spot where I needed to include a 4x6 piece of paper behind some photos. And I pulled in some pink paisley paper from the Portfolio collection. The colors match it, and it adds just a little bit more of the distressing that you see in the Glitz collections. And these were just in the scrap bin, so it was no big deal to cut a couple of pieces out. And I'm really feeling that that pink journaling card is drawing a lot of attention to itself, so I'm going to swap it out for this Major Milestones from one of the new snap pads or smash pads that's in the shop. That Major Milestones is a bit of a snarky title for a very, very small story about finally finding containers to take our lunches in that didn't drive my husband crazy when the lids would get mixed up. I like to include a little bit of wry humor on my pages. And now that I've finished the journaling, let's look at the color balance on this page, since that was another question people asked. So I said that I like to include the same thing on the left and right sides of the page, and you can see that I have blue and yellow on both sides. And the green in this paper is actually matched by the green in 2 photos. And I have aqua on both sides in a couple of places. And basically just a good balance of color across the page. The last little touch is some handwritten journaling with a white pen on the chalkboard card. And now we're going to look at embellishments. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how I stamp the embellishments, but again, I did this before I even started the page. You can see that I've got the sticker sheet from the Echo Park paper collection to the side so that I can match some inks. And I'm going to start by just quickly stamping several images from some different stamp sets that I have. This is Ellie's Studio. And the folders that you're seeing that I have my stamps stored in are actually an idea from Tracy Banks. You may know her as Mercy Tira on YouTube. And she had a great idea for storing stamps, and I've tried it and loved it. And it's so much more organized and easier to find now. These next stamps are from Pink Paisley, and these image stamps are going to stamp really well with those Prima inks. But you're going to see when I pull this speech bubble stamp out that it has a little bit of a problem. Now, the Ellie Studio stamp with that big area of color didn't have trouble with the chalk inks because it's a photopolymer stamp. The Prima stamps and some of the others like My Mind's Eye are actually an acrylic, and they have different properties when it comes to the ink. So you can see that that one is really splotchy. I'm going to quickly clean the stamp off and show you what happens when I use a pigment ink instead of the chalk ink. The pigment ink has a little bit less liquid in it, and it won't bead up on top of the stamp like you see the chalk ink. So we're just going to ink this up pretty well. These are cat's eye chalk, or cat's eye pigment inks from Colorbox. And just stamp that one again. Sorry about my head getting in the way. And you can see that one is a much clearer image. And I'm going to stamp one more little speech bubble. This one is from Lawn Fawn. Lawn Fawn stamps are all photopolymer, so you can use basically any type of ink. The only type of ink I don't recommend with a clear stamp is StazOn. It tends to stain, which doesn't bother me, but I know it bothers some people. Also, I've heard that StazOn can kind of eat into your stamps after a while, and I definitely don't want that to happen. So I'm sticking with things that clean pretty well. So I'm going to cut several of these out to make embellishments and just hand cut around. And if hand cutting is not your thing, you can often find punches that will fit. It's just a Fiskars circle punch, and I'm popping out that Love This Moment from Ellie's Studio. And again, I stamped all of these before I even started on the layout, so some of these will make an appearance on the page and some won't, but I like having them all at hand and ready. And this last one I'm going to cut out is actually that Lawn Fawn speech bubble, and there's a set of dies that goes along with this, and these are really easy to use. Once you've stamped your image, just line up the inside edge of the die with that stamped line, and I secured it with just a piece of washi tape. And I'm going to run it through my Sizzix to create this perfectly die-cut little speech bubble. And they have these for several of their stamp sets with several more on the way. But it's a quick and easy way to hand cut or to die cut your own custom embellishments. The last bit of stamping for embellishment that I'm going to show is stamping and heat embossing on vellum. This is actually a lot of fun because you can make some embellishments that look like they were the really expensive items that you can buy in the shop. But with just some Versamark and some vellum scraps, I save all of my vellum scraps from when I'm making layouts to make punch shapes and to make stamped embellishments. But you can do this really inexpensively. So just like when I stamped the journaling card, we're going to add Versamark ink. It's just a really sticky ink. And go ahead and stamp that on the vellum. And this time I'm going to add some green embossing powder. This is Leaf from American Crafts in their Zing collection. and just sprinkle it on and tap it off. Now, the circle on the right was supposed to say Instagrammed, and I knew that stamp was not going to work very well. Heat embossing doesn't work very well for stamps with a lot of extremely fine detailed white space. It works great for detailed outlines, but this was just an experiment to see what would happen. And it's really easy to heat emboss on vellum. The only thing you have to be careful of is that you don't hold the heat gun in one place for too long, or else you'll burn and start to scorch and melt the paper. So now that I have all of these in place, I'm going to look around for places on the layout that I can use them. The little Oh Happy Day banner is going to find a home first. I hand cut this one out of the vellum after I stamped and heat embossed it. And I'm going to put it in the little blank space on the journaling card that I stamped earlier. That's a spot that you can use a date stamp or another phrase stamp, but I'm going to actually put an embellishment in. I like to include embellishments on the join of photo collages, kind of at the intersection. And so the hello speech bubble will go in the middle of the collage of Tigger and I sitting on the couch. And I like the yes speech bubble next to the snarky story and the text message from my husband. But I need something to make it stand out on that yellow and blue, so I'm going to look through the Cakewalk flour sack. I like the colors in Cakewalk and how they match Happy-Go-Lucky and Uncharted Waters. There are so many collections that are in the same color palette, so it was fun to mix and match. But I'm going to take this little die-cut starburst and peel up the photo and just kind of tuck it underneath to add some contrast behind that speech bubble. Stepping away from the stamped embellishments for just a second to try to find something that works across the top of this journaling card. I probably should have measured a bit better when I printed it out because none of these banners are going to fit without actually interfering or covering up some of the text underneath. But I will finally, in just a second, find a piece of chipboard that will fit at the top, and then I'll set it aside and look at that a little bit later while I look at some of these other stickers I want to use. Now, I love this little aqua banner that says Special Day, but there's a lot of aqua in the area that I just had it in earlier, so I'm going to include it on the insert instead and put it right on top of the page protector. I'm going to look for something, though, to fill in some of that dark space behind the cupcake photo, and there are a couple of star stickers on this Cakewalk sheet that I like. And these are aqua and green, but it's not so much aqua as that banner sticker was. And I'll be adding a yellow dot in just a minute to add a little bit more contrast. I recently pulled a bunch of embellishments out of their packages and put them into colored drawers. It makes it a lot easier to find something when I know I need a specific color. And here I'm thinking I need something that's kind of reddish orange, and at first thinking that star is going to go on the cupcake photo, but instead end up putting it in the middle of the four-leaf clover. I think it looks really cute there. While the orange drawer is out, I'm back to trying to find something to go at the top of that journaling card, and I finally did find a small piece from a My Mind's Eye chipboard set that was about the same height as the rounded banner piece that worked. And I'm going to continue to look through the embellishment drawers until I find something that works. And eventually I had to give up on the idea of a third pennant altogether, but I did find something else that would work. So first I'm going to adhere these two pennant pieces down, and then these tiny word stickers on the Cakewalk sticker sheet will be perfect for adding to the end, but instead of having them hang vertically from the top, I'm going to let them stick out the side like little flags. So I have one that says cake and one that says present, so it's a cute little birthday theme without being overly birthday on the whole layout. I tend to not work on pages all in one sitting. That's why you see me bouncing back and forth. And so I've come back in and am trying to find something to go next to the two cards about running. That green sticker would have added too much green in a pretty green heavy corner already. So I've decided to instead add some pink stars to the side, and I'm going to use some glue dots to adhere those down and then add a little bit more on top to add a few layers in this side. So we'll get those stuck down and trim off the edge of that one that's hanging over the pocket, and then bring in one of those one of those hand-cut stamped embellishments. And there are just a couple more places I'd like to add some extra embellishment. Like I said, the join or the intersection of photo collages is a favorite place. And I'm taking another piece of the Cakewalk flour sack and just attaching a small flare button to it. Now, the last way that I use stamping on Project Life is to stamp directly onto the layout. And I know this can be a little scary, especially right at the end when you could mess the entire thing up. So I tend to go really, really basic with this. Not that I'm the world's most beautiful stamper to begin with. I tend to be very basic and very beginner with it. But what I do is just use plain black ink. Here I'm using VersaFine. It covers very well, especially for these small detailed stamps. And again, I've gone back to those 2 Studio Calico sets that we saw at the beginning. And I'm just stamping a couple of the small text images and adding them in some spots where I think there's maybe a little dead space, or I could use a little bit more embellishment. So I have a for the record over on the left and documented over on the right. And one place you'll almost always see me use stamping is with one of the roller date stamps. But now that I have that stamped at the top of the lucky card, the bottom is looking kind of bare, so I want to add something to sort of balance that out. And I'm going to go with a tiny chevron strip stamp or border stamp. It fits on that tiniest little block that I have, and just stamp it in black as well. And I'm going to actually double stamp this, so I'll stamp it once and stamp it again, and it'll be slightly lighter the second time to finish it off. So your challenge this week is, of course, to use some stamping on your Project Life layout. Be sure to check the box when you upload your project to the gallery to be entered to win a 2-piece gift certificate drawn from all entries at the end of the month. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend.